The ground shook as an 8-ton crane swung a steel tower segment over my backyard, shrieking loud enough to rattle windows. Marjorie Hale stormed out in a silk robe, screaming at the crew to stop, but the welders didn't even look up. 2 officers rushed in, hands on their belts, eyes locked on the rising metal spine. "Sir, what is this?" one demanded. I handed him a single, laminated permit. He read one line, froze, then turned slowly toward Marjorie. "Ma'am, you really should see what this authorizes." Her smile vanished on impact, because the woman who fined me over a tiny TV dish was about to watch a tower rewrite her entire day. The first time Marjorie Hale came after me, she didn't knock. She pounded on my door like she was raiding the place. The moment I opened it, she shoved a yellow violation slip straight into my chest. "What is that on your roof?" she snapped, pointing without even bothering to look. "It's a 20-inch TV dish," I said. "It's behind the ridge. Nobody can see it." "I can," she shot back, lips pinched tight, "and that's enough." Marjorie was the kind of HOA president who needed everything in her line of sight to bow to her standards. Her whole mission was simple: turn the neighborhood into a showroom brochure, perfect, sterile, identical. She didn't wait for discussion. "You have until 5 p.m. to remove it," she barked. "If you don't, I'll send maintenance to tear it down and bill you for labor." I stared at her, stunned by the arrogance. I'd lived here barely 2 months, hoping for quiet evenings after late engineering shifts, yet she treated me like a criminal over something smaller than a pizza box. When I tried explaining that I relied on equipment for my emergency communications work licensed for 12 years, she cut me off with a raised hand. "I don't care what you do," she said. "Rules are rules, and I enforce them." She turned away with that stiff, practiced walk of someone who expects obedience. And in that moment, something clicked. Marjorie didn't want order. She wanted control. And this wasn't going to end with a TV dish. By noon the same day, the yellow slip wasn't enough. Marjorie taped a second notice to my door, this one bolded in screaming red final warning. The TV dish had been up for barely 18 hours. When I stepped outside, she was already on the sidewalk, hands clasped behind her back like a drill sergeant inspecting troops. Her eyes flicked to my roof, then back to me, expecting fear, not confusion. "You're still using that thing?" she declared. "I'm removing it now," I said. "Good. I'll be watching." She actually said that I'll be watching. So I climbed onto the roof and removed the dish bolt by bolt. Every turn of the wrench tightened something hot under my ribs. I needed stable signal gear for emergency communications work. My shifts depended on it, but to someone who believed aesthetics outranked function, nothing I said mattered. When I stepped off the ladder with the dish tucked under my arm, she was still there. Still staring. She didn't say a word. She just gave me that little victorious smile like she'd won something. That smile made my decision for me. The next morning, something crunched in my side yard. When I opened the blinds, Marjorie was already inside my gate phone up, snapping pictures like she was documenting a crime scene. I stepped outside. "You're on my property." "I'm verifying compliance," she replied, not budging. "After all, you removed the dish, right?" Her tone was syrupy sweet, but her eyes scanned every inch of my home like she expected to catch me hiding contraband. "I said I did," I repeated. "Well," she said, taking one last photo, "some homeowners like to pretend." And she walked away, just tossed the accusation behind her like a grenade. I stood there with the gate open, behind her chest tight. I dealt with pushy HOA boards, but this was different. This wasn't enforcement, this was a hunt. Inside, I sat down and opened federal communications regulations, ones I hadn't needed in years, but could still quote from memory. The wording was unmistakable. No HOA may obstruct federally protected communications infrastructure. I leaned back in my chair. She wanted to play enforcement. Fine. I had enforcement too, just with a bigger jurisdiction. At dawn the next day, I made the call not to a lawyer, not to the HOA board, to a tower construction company. By the time the sun crested the rooftops, a rumbling truck rolled down my street, a bright green matte granite cement mixer, followed by a flatbed stacked with thick steel lattice sections. Marjorie burst out of her door, wearing a floral nightgown, and pure fury. "What is this?" she shrieked. "Upgrading my communication system," I said calmly. "For safety." Before she could unleash a reply, the mixer let out a deafening groan as it backed into position. Workers marked the dead center of my yard, then drilled deep into the soil. A massive square trench 7 feet by 7 feet devoured half my lawn. "You can't do this," she shouted, shoving past a worker. The foreman pointed to a permit on his clipboard. "Federal authorization. He's well within his rights." Her face twitched like someone pulled a wire behind it. Hours later, concrete poured into the hole thick and heavy. Rebar rods stabbed upward like skeletal fingers clawing toward the sky. By evening, the base of my tower sat silently under floodlights, curing into something immovable. From her porch, Marjorie watched it like a monster was hatching in my backyard. And honestly, she wasn't wrong. The next morning, a white HOA SUV screeched to a stop in front of my house. Marjorie stepped out with the HOA attorney behind her, both holding papers like weapons. "This construction is illegal," she barked. Right on cue, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived, lights flashing, sirens muted. They approached the tower base, now surrounded by equipment and stacked steel segments. "Sir," one deputy asked, "do you have documentation for this structure?" I pulled the laminated folder from my pocket, the same one I carried during emergency drills where people doubted private operators. He skimmed the first page, FEOA 72 Authorization, Federally Certified Emergency Communications Infrastructure. His eyebrows lifted. The HOA attorney read over his shoulder, and his expression drained from confident to horrified. "Marjorie," he whispered, voice tightening, "this supersedes HOA jurisdiction." "I don't care," she snapped. "It's ugly. It ruins everything. Make him stop." But the deputy shook his head. "Ma'am, federal law overrules aesthetics. He's clear to proceed." Marjorie stepped back as if the ground tilted beneath her. Behind her, the crane operator thumbed the ignition. The tower was about to rise, and nothing could stop it. By noon, neighbors lined both sides of the street, watching the crane hoist the first 26-foot steel segment into the sky. It hung over my yard like a massive silver spine. Workers bolted it into the concrete base with industrial wrenches, sharp metallic clangs echoing across the neighborhood. Marjorie paced her driveway, muttering angrily at the HOA attorney, who kept shaking his head. Every time a new segment lifted off the truck, she flinched like the crane was taking a swing at her. The second segment rose. Then the third. The shadow stretched over her lawn, then across her porch, then over her living room windows, thick dark lines forming patterns that looked eerily like prison bars. And still the tower wasn't finished. I climbed halfway up the structure with the crew's safety harness, carrying a Falcon X directional antenna, sharp and sleek like a metal spear. When I secured it onto the rotator mount, the tower finally looked complete, tall, commanding, impossible for anyone to ignore. Below me, Marjorie screamed something unintelligible, but the wind carried it away like it didn't matter. When my boots hit the ground again, the crew flipped the switch on the aviation safety light. A bright red blink washed over her house, then her yard, then her stunned, frozen expression. The tower was legal, the tower was permanent, and the tower was now part of her daily view, whether she liked it or not. But the sweetest part, I hadn't even turned the system on yet. This was only the beginning. By late afternoon, word had spread Marjorie was losing control. The HOA didn't even bother with their clubhouse. They marched straight into my yard, as if standing closer to the tower gave them legal authority. Clipboards out, expressions tight, posture stiff. Marjorie stood in front like a general who already knew the battle was slipping away. Arms crossed, jaw locked, voice trembling under the weight of desperation she tried to hide. "We're here to address this monstrosity," she announced, pointing toward the steel tower soaring behind me. Board members hovered behind her, trying to look official, while constantly glancing up at the structure dominating the skyline. Neighbors drifted in from porches and driveways, some curious, some entertained, all anticipating an explosion. A sheriff's patrol truck rolled up gravel, crunching under its tires. The same deputy stepped out, hands resting calmly on his belt like he'd already guessed where this was going. "Ma'am," he said politely, "you requested law enforcement assistance." "Yes," Marjorie snapped. "This tower violates multiple HOA bylaws, obstructs sightlines, disturbs the neighborhood." "And hold on," the deputy interrupted, raising a hand. "We've already reviewed the federal permit." Her nostrils flared. "Then review the HOA rules. We have standards." The deputy looked up, way up at the 62-foot steel column glowing in the late sun. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "HOA rules don't override federal authorization." He didn't raise his voice, but the silence afterward might as well have been a detonation. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Uh-oh." Marjorie's head snapped toward me. "This is your fault. You're destroying the neighborhood." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The tower behind me said enough. The deputy turned to her, expression firm. "Ma'am, we'll need to see your evidence." And that's when everything unraveled. She yanked out a thick folder stuffed with papers, printouts, bylaws, angry notes typed at 2 a.m., and shoved them into the deputy's hands like she was presenting criminal charges. "These show multiple violations," she barked. "Dish installations, roofline aesthetics, unauthorized modifications. Look at them. We cannot allow this tower to stand." The deputy flipped through them with the patience of someone reading bad fiction. When he finished, he gave them back with a polite but final tone. "These are HOA policies," he said. They're not enforceable against federally protected infrastructure. Marjorie blinked stunned. You're not listening. The board has authority. Not here, he said. Not over this. I stepped forward, not gloating, just steady, and handed the deputy a clean, organized folder. Inside were my FOA 72 authorization, structural load certification, rated for 120 miles per hour winds, soil compaction verification, federal engineering schematics. The deputy opened it, scanned the first page, and nodded like the pod. Matter was already closed. The HOA attorney, who had been sweating quietly behind Marjorie, finally stepped forward. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and said in a low voice, Marjorie, we can't challenge this. Of course we can, she barked. We just need to push harder, he shook his head. Challenging federal emergency communications infrastructure exposes the HOA to litigation we would lose instantly. We have no jurisdiction, not even minimal. Board members stiffened. One lowered her clipboard. Another stepped back entirely. You mean, a board member whispered. He's completely allowed, the attorney exhaled. Beyond allowed, legally untouchable. A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd like a wave. Everyone turned toward Marjorie. Her eyes darted from face to face, searching for someone, anyone to support her. No one moved. She stared at me again, voice shaking. You planned this, didn't you? I stayed silent. The truth didn't require confirmation. Then her composure broke. If the HOA can't stop him, she shouted, then we'll file noise complaints, visual pollution, safety concerns. Something must work. The attorney cut her off, voice firmer now. None of those apply. The structure meets every federal and city standard. She spun toward him. So what? We just give up. The deputy stepped closer, not aggressive, but with a tone that ended discussions. Ma'am, this conversation is over. The tower stays. And I strongly suggest you stop further interference. The crowd leaned in. Neighbors whispered. Some openly smiled. Above us, the tower's aviation beacon blinked for the first time, a bright red pulse, steady and slow, like a heartbeat marking the end of her reign. Marjorie stared at it, eyes wide, breath trembling. This ruins my view, she whispered. A board member muttered under her breath. You ruined your own view, Marjorie. The attorney cleared his throat once more. Effective immediately, all enforcement actions against Mr. Maddox are withdrawn, and I'll be recommending we review the president's authority, in light of recent events. The words hit her like a physical blow. You're firing me, she gasped. I built this HOA, and now, another board member said quietly, you're breaking it. Her knees buckled. She dropped onto the curb, staring blankly at the tower's long shadow, stretching across her immaculate lawn, dark, heavy lines slicing through her perfect flower beds like prison bars. The neighbors slowly drifted away as the red beacon blinked again, illuminating the scene in soft, rhythmic light. The tower stood tall, unwavering, federally untouchable. Her authority didn't, and for the first time since she'd taken over the neighborhood, Marjorie Hale had absolutely nothing left to enforce. The crowd didn't disappear right away, not really. People drifted toward porches and driveways, but every gaze stayed locked on the tower and on Marjorie. She sat frozen on the curb, staring ahead like someone watching her entire world tilt out of alignment. Above her, the red aviation beacon pulsed in slow, steady flashes, washing the street in a rhythmic glow. Neighbors pretended not to notice. The deputy gave me a small nod before heading back to his truck. The HOA attorney lingered awkwardly, shoulders tight, clearly wishing he didn't have to escort the woman who had just torched her own authority. The board members formed a loose half-circle behind Marjorie, not close enough to support her, but close enough to witness the fallout. For the first time since she moved in, the neighborhood wasn't aligned behind her voice. It was aligned behind her silence. I stood near the base of the tower, arms folded. The steel hummed in the breeze, a quiet vibration that felt steady, grounding, almost peaceful. Finally, one board member stepped forward. Mr. Maddox, she said carefully, the HOA is formally withdrawing all citations and enforcement actions against you. I nodded once. Another board member shifted uneasily. We'll also be reviewing leadership roles. Tonight showed we need change. Marjorie flinched, but kept her head down. The HOA attorney adjusted his glasses. And we'll amend our guidelines to reflect federal policy. Emergency infrastructure is beyond HOA jurisdiction. We'll make sure no one here forgets that again. A low ripple of approval moved through the neighbors. A few didn't even bother whispering. An older man near the mailbox finally said what many were thinking. Honestly, this has been a long time coming. Marjorie's head jerked up. Shock washed across her face. She hadn't expected anyone, much less her own neighbors, to speak openly against her. She rose slowly, like someone stepping through deep water. I only wanted order, she said, voice cracking. I kept things clean. I protected this neighborhood. The older man shook his head. You didn't protect us. You controlled us. It wasn't said cruelly, but it landed with the force of a verdict. Marjorie staggered back a step. The board members avoided her eyes. Even the attorney braced as if expecting another explosion, but there wasn't one. Just the beacon blinking again, washing her porch in red light. She turned toward her house and walked away. No shouting, no slamming doors. Just quiet, exhausted defeat. The attorney followed her inside. The board dissolved shortly after drifting off like a formation that had finally lost its commander. One by one, neighbors slipped back into their homes. Within minutes, the entire street fell into a calm I hadn't felt since the day I moved in. Only the tower remained, its red light blinking gently, the soft hum of steel settling into the night. I stayed where I was, letting the quiet settle over me. Months of tension seemed to lift with each pulse of the beacon. The tower wasn't just standing, it was anchoring a new reality. A small group of neighbors approached my fence. One cleared his throat. Hey, Evan, just wanted to say thanks. Most of us didn't know how to stand up to her. Another shook his head. She fined me for having the wrong color hose, a woman added. She threatened to ban my daughter's wheelchair ramp because it wasn't aesthetic. They weren't here to admire the tower. They were here because someone had finally done what none of them felt they could. Well, I said softly, tonight's a start. They nodded and drifted home, leaving me alone with 62 feet of steel and the blinking red sky. I walked to the base and rested my hand on the metal. It felt cool, solid, permanent, like a reminder that some boundaries, when set correctly, don't move for anyone. She made me take down a tiny TV dish. Now she would live with a tower. The irony was almost sweet. I grabbed a lawn chair, cracked open a cold drink, and sat beneath the structure. The beacon blinked across my yard, then across her dark windows. No yelling, no pounding on my door, no violation slips taped to anything. Just silence, just peace, just a federally protected tower doing exactly what it was built to do, stand untouchable. A light breeze drifted by, whistling softly through the steel lattice. I leaned back, exhaling for what felt like the first real breath of the year. Funny thing was, I still hadn't turned the emergency system on yet. I took another slow sip, watching the red light blink steadily into the night. Some people spend their lives chasing control. Others chase perfection. But sometimes, the very thing they try hardest to stop becomes the monument that defines them. Another blink of red light washed across the neighborhood, and I couldn't help but smile. She built this tower more than I ever did.